Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Think About It channel. Today we're doing an episode of Rough Draft where we talk to authors in the South Jersey and Philadelphia area. Today we have Laura Carolfi. She's an author based in Camden County, New Jersey. Today we're talking about her first book, Tower in the Stars, or in Espanol, Torre en las Estrellas.
Yeah.
That wasn't bad, right?
No, it was good.
My wife speaks, so I get a little bit of it. But the book is a bilingual children's book focusing on the loving relationship between a child and an adult, and reveals ways in which their love continues even after the adult dies. Laura's upcoming book is called The Hungry Little Gopher. It features American Sign Language on each page and has a glossary of the sign language used in the book, as well as provides sheet music for the song that goes along with it. So Laura's doing a little bit of everything here. That book's coming out later this year. We're going to have Laura back hopefully later this year to talk about that. But today we're talking about Tower in the Stars, which is, I'm not going to lie, Laura, it's a little bit of a tearjerker, but like in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
In a good way. My wife read it in Spanish to my son because my wife speaks, and she was tearing up a little bit as she went through, and he wasn't really paying attention because he doesn't speak.
Spanish.
He doesn't speak Spanish, but she was like, "This is so sweet." So can you share with us a little bit about your background and how you got into writing?
It goes way back to childhood that I've just always loved to read so much that eventually, it was writing too. But it was one of those things where, like, my teachers were very encouraging in elementary school. And so I would like to come up with my own stories after I had read a lot of stories. And then they would just, there were all kinds of creative things. I had this excellent teacher, Mrs. Reagan, where we would do creative projects where we'd read a book and then we'd make a board game with it. And so I think I've always had this desire to do that. But then as I went through school, my interest changed a little bit. And I guess this is where Spanish kind of hit. We didn't have Spanish in grade school. I think that wasn't popular back a little time ago. But as soon as I started taking Spanish, then I got super interested in Spanish. And one of the ways that I learned Spanish quickly was because I was a huge Harry Potter nerd. And I ended up getting the books in Spanish. So I had read the first Harry Potter book so many times that I picked it up in Spanish, and I could just kind of, I was learning escoba and broomstick and different vocabulary that I wasn't learning in class. And it really helped me. And it was kind of the same, when I was a kid, when I first started reading, it was sight words a lot. So the stories that my parents had read me over and over again, those were the ones that I picked up the book and I'm like, let me see. Maybe I can figure this out now. So it was, I guess, remembering that helped me learn Spanish and get into that. So it's a long journey about how I actually started writing children's stories. But if I was going to sum it up, I ended up majoring in Spanish in college. Then when I graduated, I ended up getting a completely different random job doing grant writing for 7 years. And then after my son was born, my first son, I found myself at home on maternity leave, and I started getting back into this creative mindset that I had as a child, where I was maybe this will be a fun story idea. And I was just writing down all kinds of ideas at that point. And some of them are still in the works, but that's kind of a long-winded with the short version, actually, of my long journey.
That's cool, though. That's cool. And it's funny you mentioned reading the Harry Potter books in Spanish, because my wife learned Spanish by studying abroad, mainly. She had Spanish in school, but she studied abroad in Ecuador when she was a junior in high school, and then Barcelona, Spain when she was a junior in college. And I remember her telling me one of the ways she tweaked and refined a lot of her Spanish was reading Harry Potter in Spanish. So that's
cool. Oh my gosh.
I guess that's the way to do it. We have 2 successful stories about it.
Yeah, I did study abroad too, but Harry Potter was before that. Because in high school, my first teacher, it was immersion style Spanish. Nice. So we showed up the first day and she said, "This is the last day I'm speaking in English." On the board, she had some key phrases like, "Puedo ir al baño, por favor?" Can I go to the bathroom, please? And she said, "Okay, and then one of them was puedo hablar en inglés, por favor, like can I speak in English please? So she said, I won't know what you're saying unless you have to use this phrase in Spanish first. So it was just, and I didn't have any experience with Spanish before then. I think I knew like maybe siesta or like taco, which isn't really.
As parents, we should all know siesta.
Yes, at this point.
Bilingual books are, I feel like the past couple years have really taken off, which is fantastic. I love it. Your book, however, caught my eye because it's a pretty serious and heavy topic for kids, especially like in a bilingual book. So what was your inspiration for tackling basically the topic of like grieving death?
Right. So I never thought I would do this, but it's based on a true story. This is what, and a lot of it, even the characters are based on real people. So my first son was born. He's 10 now. This was a little while ago. And right before he turned 2, my father-in-law got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and I was working full time during that time. Now I've been at home for a little bit, but my grandparents used to help care for my son. So my parents had him a couple of days, and then my in-laws had him a couple of days. So he had this special bond with his grandfather that he would see him routinely, and they did special things together. So when he got diagnosed with cancer, it was very fast. Pancreatic cancer, so it was actually, we found out the end of September, and then he died early October. So it was it was weeks, where we didn't really have a lot of time to, it's like you never have enough time. That's kind of like the bottom line here. But what ended up happening was he made it home from the hospital on hospice, and the nurse had told us like, I don't know if he's even going to make it on this ride. And he did. And one of his last wishes was to see his grandson before he died. But he wasn't ready that night. And so my husband ended up staying with him. I was home with my son, and I'm getting him ready in the morning to go. And then I get the call from my husband, and he's like, don't come. Like, he's not here anymore. And I was just like, what am I going to do? So I had never, you just don't think as a parent, you're never like, oh yes, I'm going to plan for that day. Like, this is what I'm going to say when that happens. Like, I was not prepared, even though I knew there was a possibility. It just didn't register that I was going to be with him. And my son was almost 2, but he could talk a little bit. Like, he could string like 5 words together. And so, I had just told him like, we're going to see grandpa. And then I get the call and I started crying, and he was like, mommy, like, like, what are we doing here? And I was like, grandpa's gone. And then I was trying not to cry, so I'm like looking up, and I kind of looked out the window, and he asked me where, and I was like, I couldn't answer him, like I'm just looking out the window. So then he told me, he was like, in the stars, and I was kind of like, yeah, because like, what do you say to a 2-year-old? Like, and then I'm like, maybe he knows something that I don't. Maybe he's more in tune with whatever's going on in the universe. Maybe has some kind of connection. So that was kind of comforting to me. But then I started crying even more, and then he goes and he comes back with a box of tissues, this sweet little kid. And I was just like, oh my gosh. But afterward, like, you go through, it's just, grieving is, it's different for everybody, but it kind of like slammed us. And then after the fact, like a few days had gone by after the funeral, and I just wanted to preserve certain things about the relationship. So I started writing a story. It was called Grandpa in the Stars at that point. And so I wrote down a draft of that. And then a couple months went by, and I was like, maybe I could do something with this, but I was pregnant at the time. And so I was almost due. I only had a couple months left. So I had sent my story to a couple of friends, and I said, I'd like to do this like for my family. Do you think you could illustrate for me? But none of that panned out. And then I had a baby. So then fast forward years go by, right? And I didn't pick it up again for a while. But there's a lot in the story. Like, I guess I don't know if you can, let me see if I can show you.
You have your copy? I have my copy too.
Oh, yes.
I was just gonna comment,
So,
like speaking to what a lot of what you just said.
mhm,
Um, the illustrations in this book, I think, do a really good job of what you're trying to do, and it's like capturing those moments the two had together. Because there are a lot of
thank you.
small snapshots in the pages, and I was about to pull some up, like of Tiny and Tower. Tiny is the baby of the book, and Tower,
Mm.
doing things
Yeah.
like this together and napping together. So the book does a beautiful job of sort of capturing the moments of a young one and like a grandpa figure.
Mhm.
And I think it's a cool testament to him, now that I
Thank
know that
you.
story.
But so Ryan Conzelman, the illustrator, this is just strange. So I had kind of let this sit, and then I was pregnant again with my daughter. So this is like number three, and so now we're like, I mean, how many years had gone by at this point? Maybe like seven, and my kids went to vacation Bible school, and while we were there, I overheard a woman talking, and she's like, "Oh, my son did the artwork that's in the hallways for the children, and he's an aspiring children's book illustrator." And I was like, "Hmm." And so then I liked the illustrations in the hallways. So got his information down, but then life goes by. So I think it was 2 years ago. Anyway, I contacted him finally. I checked him out online and I really liked his illustrations. And so I reached out to him through email. It turned out he lived in my town. Like I could walk to his house literally. But
Nice.
we started this right before COVID. And it ended up that even though he was blocks away from me, everything was virtual. It was all through email. And I had certain ideas of things that I wanted to see. And he loved drawing dogs. That was his favorite type of animal to illustrate. And I knew, I was like, I want it to be animals because I feel like when you're talking about grief, it kind of like it's easier to talk about it sometimes for a child, especially if it's like, oh, it's animals, it's not
Hmm.
humans, just to kind of. So I just told him like, whatever animal's your favorite, like, let's go, and it ended up working out. Like I loved his illustrations too.
It's
They're really.
beautiful. It's a beautiful book.
Thank you. Thanks.
And that sort of leads into my next question, which is about I don't know if you know, I'm also a local author. I self-published like a young adult novel almost 4 years ago now, and I'm hoping this year I publish my sequel.
Nice.
I think a lot of times, if you haven't done it before, you don't necessarily realize how much time and work and effort and
Yeah.
team goes into making a book. And I think especially a children's book. Because with the novel, like I had my wife do my edits for me. I had a guy do my cover, and then I sort of did all the other stuff. But I know with your book, like you had an illustrator, you wrote
Mhm.
it, you had an editor for your Spanish part to make sure you were doing the
Mhm.
Spanish justice.
Yes, I did.
So you already talked about Ryan, your illustrator, a little bit, but can you tell us about the other people that were involved in bringing this thing to light?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess a lot of it, like I self-edit it so many times. Like the first one was a lot longer, but for a children's book, you need to be as concise as possible, word choices. So I did a lot of that, but I kept like asking my husband. He was like, "Hey, can you read this new draft?" And so I did a lot of that myself, but the Spanish, and especially over so many years that it took, it was kind of like, hmm. But with the Spanish, my friend Ramona, whom I met her in college, and she's a native Spanish speaker from the Dominican Republic, and I was like, I need somebody who's native because it's just different when when you're born speaking the language, I think. So she looked at the Spanish for me and made sure, and there were definitely edits there because I wrote the Spanish first myself, but it's a little bit choppier when it's your second language, I think.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm very formal too about stuff. And she was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, we can change this up a little bit over here." So she
Absolutely.
helped me a lot.
And when I have authors on the show, I always love to, like, authors or entrepreneurs. I love to go and read reviews that people have to say, the good and the bad, just to find out sort of the pulse of what people think, because people will tell you what they think in a review. And I came across one review on Amazon for this book, and I don't know if you've seen it or not. If you follow your
Oh,
reviews,
yeah, I do. I read them all. I'm like, "Oh, thank you."
I'm guilty too. But I found one review that I thought was such a cool shout out to you and the labor of love that went into this book. I want to read it for the people, and I would love your reaction to it. And you've probably read it before already, since you've already read your stuff. But I want to read it for the people, because if they're sort of like teeter-tottering, I think this might seal the deal that you should get a copy of this book. So the line of the review says, as a certified child life specialist with extensive experience in the end-of-life conversations with children and adults, I would highly recommend this book to any parent, caregiver, medical professional, or therapist working with children in the midst of their grief. So thankful for a resource like this. It's a must-have. So when you hear praise like that coming from a professional in this field that you're writing about, how does that make you feel?
I mean, I wanted to help people with this story, so I'm like, okay, like, it's happening, like, it's helpful. And I know, so there were some people that wrote me handwritten letters that are not like, online or anything like that, but those things too, like, it just helps me realize, because one of the reasons, like, you can kind of see the characters here that they're not, like, they're gender neutral a little bit, because I wanted a book that's really versatile, that you could, like, let's say it's a female adult that dies, or, they could be anything. And Tiny and Tower, those names too. So that way, if you're in an organization like a hospital or like a school, you can use this. Because a lot of the books that you see, it's like, it will be like grandma died very specifically, or grandfather. And I wanted something a little more flexible, I guess, because I couldn't find something like that. But there was one little girl that her grandmom died, and she wrote me a note afterward because she read this book, and she said, "Oh, that's me and grandma." Like, that's what and I was like, oh my gosh. So, like, coming from a child, like, especially, I was like, oh, like, like, so other people, I guess, it's helpful. And I tried to make it that there's like an openness about death and dying. It's not, it lets parents explain their own beliefs. It doesn't, I'm not saying it's a certain way or not. And I think that's been helpful for families too, and there was even a woman, an adult, who told me, my brother just died recently, and I read your book, and I found it comforting. And I was surprised at that a little bit, just because that's like a sibling relationship, right? But yeah, so I'm happy about that, because it's my first book I've ever published, and it was like, I didn't even try to submit it to any editors or anything. I was like, oh, let's just see. Like, I really wanted to have so much in it. Like, I guess I wanted to control too much about the pictures, the illustrations, because it's personal. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad that it's helping other people too.
Yeah. So we'll sort of tease what's going on later this year with you. Next thing on the horizon is the Hungry Little Gopher.
Yeah. Can
you tell us a tiny bit about that, sort of to whet the palates?
Okay, so this is bilingual, but it's very different. It's bilingual in English and American Sign Language, and it's a song. So this one, I also wrote a super long time ago, before even this book, Tower in the Stars, but it's very unique, and I guess the main message is like to spread the joy of gardening to children, but it's through song and the sign language and really funny illustrations. So that one's coming up. I'm going to be at the Haddon Heights Farmers Market this Sunday.
Oh, nice.
They have this, like, it's the Hip for Kids tent. So there's like a table, and I'm going to be doing seed starting with kids. So you can come and start little seeds, and you can take them home. And then we also have Hungry Little Gopher hand puppets. So you can color in a puppet and put on a paper bag, and then you can eat your vegetables.
Nice.
So I'll be doing that.
That's awesome.
But the book's not out yet. It's coming out. I'm going to do a Kickstarter for that. Okay. And I'm launching that in June 10th for a month, just so people can pre-order the book. Because I found with Tower in the Stars, I had no experience, right? So I kind of just was like, KDP, like, mm-hmm. Load. There it goes. It's out in the world. And like, I told my friends and family, but I didn't. There's so much that I've learned just from that experience of publishing this book. So this time around, I'm doing things differently. So I'm hopeful that it's going to be it's going to be better received, and people are going to like know it exists, basically.
Yeah, I hear that. The self-publishing thing is a journey. it can be a struggle. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for it. I think what you're doing is so incredibly cool, mixing all these different languages and music and these topics. I think it's so cool. So when we sort of got together to do this, I was really excited to talk about both books. Where can people, if they've enjoyed this conversation, if they made it thus far, and they're like, I gotta get on board with what this lady's doing, where can they learn more about you and your books online?
Okay, so I have my website. It's lauracarolfi.com. And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I have a YouTube channel, which right now does have a music video for the Hungry Little Gopher. And it has sign language in it too, so it's pretty cool. So if you want to check that out and do some fun things.
You can get ahead of the curve and learn
Yeah.
this before the book comes out.
And then on my website, the Kickstarter, that page isn't live yet, but as soon as it is, it's going to be on my website, like the link to that.
Cool. And I'll be sure to edit the description of this so when it does go live, because it's not live yet, we're still in the end of May, but when it does go live, we'll throw that in the description too, so you can hop on board if you want to hop on board with that.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Laura, thank you so much for being on the show. I am so excited to see what's next.
Thank
And
you.
I'll be pre-ordering a copy for myself and my son and my daughter, so we can hop on that train. But I'm really excited. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.